I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm Sean Carroll, Anera, President and CEO. We have a wonderful panel of experts from Gaza with you today, and there's not a lot of time. I want to get to them quickly, but we have a quick little film about Anera so that people who may not know who Anera is get to see that. I'll say a few opening words, and then we're going to turn over to our panel. Big thank you to all of you who've joined us. More people will be coming in, but we want to get going. So let's go ahead and show that film about Anera. Well, thank you for letting us show you that. Again, I'm Sean Carroll, Anera President and CEO. On the wall behind me here is a map of the world upside down, and I'm feeling these days like the world is upside down. The war in Ukraine, another mass school shooting here in the United States. Seemingly incontrovertible evidence has come out that journalist Shireen Abu Akleh was killed by Army Israeli snipers. And today we're talking about Gaza. 15 years under siege. This year marks 15 years of siege, of blockade, but of course it's really all part of the occupation, which has been going on much longer. Anera has been working in Gaza almost since the beginning of the foundation of Anera after the '67 war, some 55 years ago. It's our largest office. And it's always hard for us to talk about Gaza, and I'm not going to talk about it very long today because I'm a lucky one who gets to visit fairly often, and I am always pushing and cajoling and trying to get more people to visit, and it's a struggle because of perceptions of Gaza and then because of the need to get permits from the Israelis to get in. But I'm always encouraging people to go because it always feels like a tale of two cities or a tale of two strips. The reality is not what people think it is. It's some ways it's not, it doesn't fit the caricature that many people have. There's a lot more going on and a lot more vibrancy. I look at that's of course just a fake screenshot behind Yasser there, but it reminds me that the beach in Gaza is a beautiful beach, and what goes on the beach in Gaza, could be very similar to the economics and the tourism and the commerce that goes on further north up along the beach. When I go there and I see Anera's work, I always feel hopeful. But I think we're here to talk today about the difficulties, the challenge of doing that work. We're going to hear from 4 Palestinians who live in Gaza. They're going to tell you about their own personal experiences and about the work that they do. I hope that as they describe the challenges that they face every day, they can also fill you in on some of the amazing work that they're doing, and we're proud to be able to work with them. At the end, Anera's own Rania Al-Khelu, who's our communications manager for all of Palestine, but does it from Gaza, is going to tell you a little bit more about our work. I'll just say that Anera has a new Palestine country director, Sandra Rashid. She just made her first trip to Gaza as Anera country. She had the reaction that we all have when we go, that wow, the work we're doing is life affirming, it's life saving. It's amazing what our staff gets done under the circumstances, and I hope we'll be able to talk about that a little bit at the end. I'm going to right now introduce the first of our panelists. I want to thank everyone for being on this call and for taking interest. There's a lot of people tuning in today. There's huge interest in this topic, and I hope we can fill people in on what's going on in Gaza. We'll start with Jihad Abu Salem. He's the Education and Policy Associate of the Palestine Activism Program at the American Friends Service Committee. His main area of research is Palestinian and Arab perceptions of Zionism and the Jewish question before 1948. Jihad combines his passion for history with his commitment to activism and policy change work. Jihad.
Thank you, Sean, for the kind introduction. And big thanks to Anera for inviting us today and for giving us the opportunity to talk about Gaza. There are not enough opportunities to talk about Gaza due to the immense scale of the tragedy that is going on there, but also due to how much hope Gaza inspires. So I think the part that I'm going to talk about today is to put Gaza in the broader context of the Palestinian plight and the Palestinian struggle for freedom and liberation, and explain how the blockade is yet another chapter in this long history of occupation that has been unfolding for decades. People talk about the Gaza Strip in many ways. It's described as an open-air prison and a place where a large number of people live, as a place of many crises. And one of the things we repeatedly hear about Gaza is that it's a place with high population density. If one opens Google Maps and looks at the Gaza Strip via satellite view, the Gaza Strip appears as a confined gray spot surrounded by agricultural land on the Israeli side of the 1949 armistice demarcation line, and with the Mediterranean Sea to the west. And while today's event recognizes the Israeli-imposed siege or blockade as perhaps the harshest and the most pressing episode in Gaza's history, and I believe that today's event and all of my fellow panelists here call and will call for an immediate action to bring the blockade as a policy of collective punishment to an end. It is important also to consider the broader and longer history of how the Gaza Strip ended up in this reality today. And the story, like every aspect of the Palestinian experience, begins before and during the 1948 Nakba. The Nakba being the catastrophe, the event that led to the founding of the State of Israel in 1948 on the ruins of more than 500 Palestinian cities and villages, and on 78% of historic Palestine or Mandate Palestine. As part of the process of the Nakba, or the unfolding of the Nakba as a process before 1948 and during 1948 and even after 1948, the Zionist movement and then the State of Israel made sure to establish a state on the majority of Palestinian land and expel hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from towns and villages and cities all over historic Palestine. And as a direct result of the 1948 Nakba, the total area of what used to be the Gaza subdistrict, which was one of historic Palestine's largest administrative subdistricts, was reduced into what is today the Gaza Strip. So before 1948, there was no such entity known as the Gaza Strip. There was the Gaza Subdistrict as one of the administrative districts of historic Palestine. The Gaza Subdistrict was home to more than 53 cities, towns, and villages, and it included large chunks of land in historic Palestine, more than 1,111 square miles of land in historic Palestine, to be reduced overnight during the 1948 Nakba into today's 140 square miles known as the Gaza Strip. So the Gaza Strip emerges as a product of a man-made war situation, where demographic and geographic realities were created at the barrel of the gun during the 1948 Nakba. And as part of that process, more than 200,000 Palestinians from many parts of historic Palestine sought refuge in what became the Gaza Strip, in addition to a population of 100,000 Palestinians who were already confined within the boundaries of this new entity known as the Gaza Strip. And when the Gaza Strip emerges after 1948, as a new entity, it was meant to be a temporary refuge for the large number of refugees who pursued safety and security during the 1948 massacres and events that unfolded in Palestine. So for most of the people, for all of the refugees who ended up on the Gaza side of the demarcation line in 1949, the goal for them was to seek temporary refuge so that they can be allowed to return to their homes, towns, and villages after the war is over, which didn't happen. So we are dealing with one of the longest cases of people being trapped for political considerations, for demographic considerations. And of course, the founding of Israel represented the goals that the Zionist movement has pursued for a long time, that is to establish a Jewish majority state at the expense of Palestinians. So the Gaza Strip emerges as this new geographic entity after 48, and it was a new territory that included a large number of people, but very limited resources that can provide for them. And this sets in motion one of the disadvantages that people in Gaza have been experiencing for more than 7 decades. And despite that, Palestinians in Gaza have been productive in many ways. But of course, the Gaza Strip as a territory, which represents only 1% of historic Palestine's total territory, that includes today the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and what is the State of Israel. So after 1948, the plight of Palestinians, who majority of whom are refugees in Gaza, they live within walking distance from their towns and villages, who they can see across the fence, across the demarcation line, and can't access, and are reminded every day of the Nakba, not only as an event from the past, but also as a process that continues. The experience continues after 1948, with Gaza being occupied by Israel in 1956, and for 7 months, and people there experienced massacres, experienced arrests, experienced all sorts of human rights violations that were committed against them. Fast forward to 1967, the Gaza Strip falls under Israeli military occupation during the war known as the 6-Day War. And following the 1967 war, Palestinians in Gaza become ruled by a military authority, the Israeli authority, that one of the things that it tried to do was to embark on a settlement project within the boundaries of the Gaza Strip. So to add insult to injury, between 1967 and 2005, on almost 1/3 of the area of the Gaza Strip, lived around 8,000 Israeli settlers, exploiting Gaza's most fertile soil and freshwater reservoirs. And after 1967, in addition to this new settlement enterprise that Israel established, basically contributing to negatively impacting the demographic and agricultural and environmental life in Gaza, Israel ruled with an iron fist, basically, oppressing people, preventing all forms of dissent, even through peaceful protest, and so on and so forth. Fast forward into the first Intifada, and after the first Intifada in 1987, and the period that followed with the Oslo Accords and the so-called peace process, we end up in a situation where Gaza becomes further isolated from the rest of Palestine and from the rest of from areas like the West Bank and Jerusalem. In 1991, Israel issued a general movement order that, in 1991, Israel revokes a 1970 general movement order that allowed Palestinian movements. So beginning in the 1990s, in the early 1990s, Gaza begins to witness Israeli measures that limit Palestinian freedom of movement and further fragments Palestinians geographically and demographically. And even after the Oslo Accords, which were considered as a new era of peace by the international community, Palestinians in Gaza became more isolated. And this really becomes more Palestinians in Gaza experienced this more after the second Intifada in 2000, as family reunification was limited and more further restrictions on movement were imposed, and basically Palestinians in Gaza become territorially separated from the rest of Palestine. So I say all of this because when we look at the blockade starting in 2007, I highly encourage people to think of the blockade as yet another chapter in this long history of that starts before and during 1948 and continues as a process of further separation and further isolation and further fragmentation of Palestinian life in all of its aspects. And this is something that our parents have experienced and we continue to experience on an individual level. I'm Palestinian from Gaza. I left the Gaza Strip in 2013 to pursue my graduate degree in the US, and I lived, the 20 years I spent in Gaza were mostly a time of turmoil and a time of uncertainty and a time of crisis. I grew up witnessing the second Intifada and then living the early episodes of the blockade and experiencing what the blockade represented for people on a daily basis. The lack of electricity, lack of water, lack of access to freedom of movement. The fact that I have been in the US for 9 years and I haven't been able to go back because one can't risk entering if entering Gaza is even possible, but then not being able to leave due to the uncertainty when it comes to freedom of movement and the inability to travel normally from Gaza. And my situation really is nothing compared to the reality of thousands of people who lose their scholarships or who are in urgent need for medical treatment and can't leave due to the Israeli permit regime and so on and so forth. But I'm sure my colleagues will talk about that in detail. But the point of everything that I tried to describe and explain here is that one, Gaza cannot be viewed in separation from the rest of Palestine and from the rest of the Palestinian experience. And two, we, in order to address the current reality in Gaza, and in addition to addressing the pressing humanitarian needs and the current humanitarian crisis that has been going on as a result of the blockade, there has to be a political vision for addressing the historical injustices that are at the very root of why Gaza suffers today and why other Palestinian communities in the West Bank, in Jerusalem, in Sheikh Jarrah, in the Naqab, inside what is today the state of Israel, this is this is one system of oppression and that has been trying to fragment Palestinians and weaken them, and prevent them from achieving their self-determination and freedom. So this is the only way, in my opinion, we can understand Gaza. Gaza cannot be separated from the rest of Palestine and from a broader understanding of the Palestinian experience since 1948. And I think, you know, this understanding, though it requires lots of courage and doing a lot of homework to make sense of Gaza's experience, is necessary in order for us to not only address the present problems, but also think about the future in a productive way. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jihad. Thank you very much for that historical overview, giving us the context. I'm going to move on to Dr. Yasser Abu Jamal. He's a Palestinian psychiatrist who trained in 2012 in Birmingham, UK, and he's the director of the very well-known, highly regarded Gaza Community Mental Health Program, which uses a biopsychosocial model of care that recognizes the context of oppression and recurring bombardment that we've just been hearing about that Gazans live through every day. Dr. Abu Jamal.
Thank you very much, Shan, and good afternoon, everyone. I don't know from where to start, but thank you very much, Jihad, for the introduction and for laying out the context. A few days ago, I was just going out in the morning, heading towards work, when I saw one of my neighbors who lost his house in 2021 with the reconstruction works beginning, which was something that really looked nice and great. I saw the old man who was in his late 60s, just observing how the reconstruction is going on. That two-story building was a place where 4 families were living, his family and 3 families of his sons. They are now scattered, of course. He lived in his old place and they were in different places. And luckily, 1 year after the destruction of their houses, the reconstruction began. I clearly remember in May 2021, just returning back to my house, because we live in a place that usually you need to leave when the offensives take place in the eastern side of Khan Yunis. I remember just seeing him sitting next to the debris, to the wreckage of his house, and I told him, something that we always say, Alhamdulillah as-salam in Arabic, which is, thank God you are safe. He said, yes, Alhamdulillah, thank God. The main thing is that I and the kids, everyone is still safe and alive. No one is really hurt. No one was in the area, which is really fantastic. So I see him with the construction happening. I look at his face, it's just a regular person who's just sitting to his house that is going to be rebuilt soon, which means 1 year from the attacks, 1 year after the last offensives or attacks in May 2021. This is not him only. There are more than 1,600 residences that were fully destroyed during the May attacks. The ironic thing is that UNRWA is promising the rebuilding, the reconstruction of about 700 houses. The Qataris are also, promising to reconstruct about 560 units, and then the remaining, which are maybe 400, something more, something less, are still on hold. The ironic thing is that those housing units, they belong to multiple story buildings, or the towers. If you remember the towers that, for example, the Associated Press was there, in Al Jazeera, that tower that was bombed. Now there is a big question: who is going to rebuild that? There are discussions, because is this, of course, most of the residences were just flats where people were living, but there were also some offices. So there is a discussion who is going to build that. The other fact, which is that until now, there are about 1,000 residences that were destroyed in 2014 that were not, that are not rebuilt yet. And this story keeps happening every now and then. In 2014, when the reconstruction began, also about 1.5 years after the ceasefire, there were some houses that were not rebuilt yet from 2008, 2009. So these people continue to live. And what does it mean that the house is not rebuilt yet? It's not only for the house residents, it's also for the people who live in the neighborhood. It's also for the kids who go to the street and they try to walk to the kindergartens or to the school places. It's not only houses that were destroyed, the infrastructure were attacked. Some of the kindergartens, some of the health facilities, some of the education facilities were also partially, let me say, affected. So the whole population, if you could say, not only suffered during the 11 days attack, but we had to go on and to live and to see things that would remind us all that something was really happening during that period of time. Now, this is one part of the story. The other part of the story is another interesting thing. It's not only what you see on the ground, but it's also what you hear throughout the day and night, which is the sound of the drones. Me and Dream, we were sitting with some few friends, actually foreign friends, in a place like at the sea beach, a very fancy place. And suddenly they told us, why the sounds of the drones are so loud? How can you live with that? I just, shrugged and they said, it's not the problem that the sounds of these drones, but also what those sounds bring with them. They bring memories. They bring, unfortunately, very terrible memories of people who got killed, of houses that were attacked. One of the ironic things, which is that they were sometimes attacking people who were just on motorcycles. And some of those people were just people who are working at the municipalities, just maneuvering or trying to point or direct the water pipes from which neighborhood to which neighborhood, because we have such a poor infrastructure when it comes to water that you cannot really open it 24 hours to every place. So some of those people were unfortunately killed just because they were riding on motor. And the question comes all the time, who was spared from the exposure to traumatic event in May 2021? Basically, no one who was in Gaza Strip. The bombardment was severe. The loud sounds of bombing were there and here everywhere. I don't have the figures that come and bring the number of bombs that were falling in Gaza, but it's a very small geographical area, and many areas were intensely bombed. The question is, traumatized? Are we traumatized? We were exposed to trauma, yes. Are we traumatized? Probably many people were traumatized. UNRWA says that about one half of the children, they need some kind of psychosocial interventions or mental health interventions after the May attack. This is something that came in last August. Previously in 2016, 2017, hearing that about 1/3 of the children need some kind of intervention, maybe 1/4 of the children need some kind of intervention. But with the level of exposure, almost every child is in need for some environment, some safe environment that will take him away from the environment that we live in. Basically, it's not just a traumatic event, it's the continuity of an ongoing fear, ongoing anxiety, ongoing worry about what might happen today, what might happen tomorrow, what might happen the day after tomorrow. Do we have post-traumatic stress disorder? Yes, we have some cases, for example, with PTSD, this very famous notion of traumatic, of results of exposure to trauma. But this is not enough to explain what happens to Palestinians. This is not enough to explain a place where 2/3 of the living people are refugees who were uprooted from their hometowns 7 decades or more ago. This is not the enough word to speak about people who anticipate every now and then another stress. It's not a word that is enough to explain an 18 or 17-year-old child who remembers for large-scale operations for attacks that happen to him or to her or to him. What can we do? The question is the anticipation also of traumatic events. Now we heard, and this is again, it began with Ramadan, and every day in Ramadan, the one that ended about 3 weeks ago, in the morning, we heard that, the Israelis are attacking Al-Aqsa Mosque, taking the people out of Al-Aqsa, and then allowing the Israeli settlers to go into Al-Aqsa, like almost every day. And people here in Gaza were saying, is this going to end up with another large-scale operation? The next question, are we going to have a good Eid al-Fitr, the Ramadan ending celebration, or it's going to be another attack? And the question is that, okay, now we are good, nothing happened. What will happen next, Now in the news, they speak about the 29th of May, which is the flag march in Israel. And imagine that they celebrate Jerusalem Day, the day that they occupied East Jerusalem in 1967, and they insist that this march should go through Muslim Palestinian neighborhoods and then should end at Al-Aqsa. This is really very interesting, and the question is, how is that going to? Is it going to provoke another offensive? Is it going to provoke a response from the Palestinians, whether in Gaza or another place? This is a big question. So everyone is going through these questions about what's going to happen next. Now, we all the time say that when you have some stressors, you will always have, or you will always need to think about coping strategies, or what resilience factors you have. Everyone who comes and visits Gaza, they say, well, people are really resilient. We salute the Palestinian people for their ability to cope and to continue to live under such tremendously pressuring living conditions. Well, that's certainly true, but after decades and after 15 years of blockade, you do not really expect people to continue to have the same reservoir of abilities and capacities to cope with the difficulties, to cope with the stressors. You can cope with things one time, two times, one attack, a second attack, but maybe not the fourth, maybe not the fifth. You can live under the harsh economic conditions, maybe for 1 year, for 2 years, but after 15 years, really, it's doubtful. People are really living under severe stresses, and when you Google any place and you just look at the impact of chronic stress, you'll find very interesting things. The bodily symptoms, the somatic symptoms, like hypertension, like increased problems with various bodily illnesses, but also you have the impact on the psychological well-being, on the mental health well-being. And that's why in GCMHP, one of the very challenging realities that we face when we work with people, what can we offer if those people come complaining not only from the traumatic event and the implication of the traumatic event, but also complaining of the current realities, that we do not really see things improving in the future. And the other thing that we are really facing is relapse. So how many times you are exposed to trauma, how many times the symptoms return back to your children, like bedwetting, like night terrors, like nightmares, etc., etc. When you help once, can you help twice? Yes, we do our best with that. But how many times can we repeat that? Are Palestinian people going to have more of a fatigue, with losing hope? We see some elements of that. For example, many young people thinking of leaving Gaza, migrating, just leaving Gaza one way or the other. Many of the families start to increase the complaints about violence, domestic violence. Parents sometimes yelling, abusing verbally or even physically their children. Would that continue? If the realities will not change, things will get really, really worse. What's needed? We need, just as we always say, we need. I used to say that we need hope. Well, hope is not enough. It's not a word, hope. It's an action. You need to make something that would change the life of the Palestinian people in Gaza Strip. And the very basic thing is their human right. The very basic thing is their right to movement, to put an end to the blockade. This is the very basic thing, to enable Palestinian people to get hold of their resources. They say that we have gas in the Mediterranean. It's not the area behind me. This is something from the Zoom, but we have something. We have the most vivid land on planet Earth, with people from the three main religions just hoping to come and visit Palestine. We have so many resources, but we don't really have the ability to control those resources. We don't have the freedom that is a very basic human rights. Thank you very much, and I look forward towards Q's and A's.
Thank you, Dr. Yasser. Thank you for your work always and today and always in helping to inform the world that you and the Gaza Community Mental Health Program do. So thank you. I'm going to turn to Reem Abu Jaber. I've had the pleasure and honor of seeing Reem on several of my trips to Gaza. She's the founder and executive director of the Nawa Center for Culture and Arts Association in Deir al-Balah. And because of Reem and her team of dedicated educators, thousands of Palestinian children's families and educators in Gaza have access to culture and art and psychosocial programs. I'd like her to tell us a little bit about what she sees with the youth that she works with. And I'll just say that if we could recreate Reem and the Nawa Center and replicate it all throughout Gaza, and then more importantly, perhaps adding to that, have the exchange of arts and culture coming in and out of Gaza, it would be a different world. Reem, I turn it over to you. And let me just say also that we're hugely proud partner of the Nawa Center, and really a great example of Anera's work, where we are just supporting the leadership, the vision, the knowledge of local leaders, and we're doing it both with institutional funding and with family funding. The Daoud Hamad Siam family built a garden at the Nawa Center, and we hope we can continue working with Reem to build that center. Reem, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Hello, everyone. 15 years under siege in 10 minutes. What a challenge. To make it direct and simple, today I will present the young people voices. Actually, today I'm not going to analyze or bring any kind of statistics or readings or whatever. I will just quote what the young people in Deir al-Balah said about the siege for the last 15 years of their life. But first, I would like to thank my colleagues, Farah, Yasmin, and Ghadir, who helped me in this. So we had a meeting with the young people and youth in Deir al-Balah, and the major question was, so what is life like under siege for you? And I will quote, everything I say from now is a quote from these young people, males and females. Part of my family lives outside Gaza. For many years, I couldn't see them, and I never know if I will ever meet them again. I always wanted to study law, but everyone around me says it has no future here, unless if I leave Gaza and start a career outside. I started to cope with the siege. No opportunity for me to leave Gaza and study music. I know if I want to succeed, I have to leave Gaza. My head is full of ideas and goals. It is very difficult to make it come true. It needs a lot of financial and self-support, and both are missing in my life. When we grow up in Gaza, the siege grows up with us too. And the more we realize the siege, the more depressed we become. Everyone in Gaza wishes to travel. My personal dream is to become an actor. I don't have enough space in Gaza to become what I want. I wish I could travel and study drama and to experience this with more qualified people outside Gaza. Even if we are not under direct Israeli aggression at the moment, it is still a major obstacle in my life. For example, when I think of my future and my goals, I immediately think if an Israeli aggression occurs, everything I do will stop. I felt the siege when I traveled and returned back to Gaza. Suddenly, everything became limited, decreased, and so little. I thought if I could study outside, my life will change. I will have more opportunities. It doesn't mean we don't have a life in Gaza, but it means we have a life that is difficult more than any other place in the world. I am very tired with the economic, social, and political situations. Social media every day brings in new issues, which takes my energy away, and I feel exhausted at the end of the day. I don't have any safe space for me as a youth in Gaza. I am so much distracted and can't focus on my life. Gaza is a very small place and we are trapped in it. If I travel outside Gaza, I feel very far away from everything in the world. I am completely isolated in everything, even in how I look like. If the siege was removed, it's like opening a door for me after 15 years of imprison. First, I will go for entertainment. I am so much depressed and everyone around me is the same. I wake up every morning thinking no gas cooking, no money to charge my mobile, no job, no electricity. 15 years of my life was total waste. These 15 years are the most important years of my whole life. Quotes finish here. These exact words were collected from people who were 15 years and more and until 25 years old. it was the most sad, this was the most sad event in my life, where we have all these words and much, much, much more than this. These are only collective words from these young people who have all these burdens over their shoulder and expecting to change their life and the future of this country. Through one of the activities with the young children, the animator asked the children, so why do we use the watch? Where it was an educational activity where we asked them, why do we use these items? And I was shocked because one of the children, who of course only witnessed the siege and Israeli aggressions, he said, we use the watch to know when the electricity will come back. And that's something that I never thought of that this way. So the new generation are born and raised on some different priorities and different needs. And every day I see and I learn from the children. I see how much we lose of them. I see how much efforts are still needed to go and to continue and to do more with the children and the young people. As Dr. Yasser said, perhaps 1 in 3 children in Gaza already required support for trauma. This is a lot. And imagine with all these obstacles in Gaza and closures and everything that you can imagine and you can't imagine, we must continue. The psycho-support sessions for children or traumatized people outside Gaza mean that you help people to get over a challenge or a disaster and come back to your normal life or normal routine of your normal life. And thinking of Gaza, the children and young people, I ask myself, so what is this normal routine of life that I want to help the children to go back to it? I'm 51 years old, and this is one of the most difficult questions over my career. All my career was spent in education with children and young people. And every time I'm faced with these type of questions, which I can never find an answer to. What is it exactly that we are doing? My father couldn't escape out this question. It seems I will not escape this question. And it seems Fatma and Maryam, my nieces who are very young, they will not escape that question too. We are all in a trap. It's a continuous trap. We're just living in the trap. It's not living in the world. Nawa for Culture and Arts Association was established to support children, young people, and youth learning and education. We believe education is the only weapon at hand. And forgive my language, weapon is a normal word in here. Through a good education, we can transform our lives. The siege over Gaza continued for the last 15 years, and I know in my heart that it will not last forever. And for that day to come, we must continue. We have no options but continue working in education, in culture, in art, in psychosocial support. I know things will change one day, and for that day to come, I want to continue. Support lifting the illegal and inhuman siege over Gaza and end the Israeli occupation. That's our message. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reem. You and Dr. Yasser both talked about the huge need for psychosocial support, and you're providing it every day. And we talk about the numbers. And I recall a conversation I had with the leader of a women's program association in one of the refugee camps, and we asked about mental health and psychosocial support, who needs it, and her answer was everyone who comes to this center, everyone who lives in this camp needs it. It's only a question of degree, and we see that and we recognize it, and I hope we can do more with you and with others in those areas. Thank you for giving us the voice of the children that you work with. Thank you very much. I'm going to introduce Rania Al-Khilwe. She is Anera's communications manager in Palestine. She reports on our impact on the ground and reports on the realities that Palestinians face in their daily lives. And we regularly feature her stories and her blogs and her films that she does, interviewing some of the people we work with. Very glad to have you here, Rania. Take it away.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you to all the panelists for these insightful perspectives on the Gaza siege. It's indeed hard to imagine a life without grieving in Gaza. It's sad to start my analysis this way, but growing up in Gaza, I've observed that every era of our history comes with a specific context, meanings, and interpretations of struggles, constraints, as well as hopes. And the blockade itself plays a major part of this story. So in other words, looking at the time just before the 2007 Gaza siege, life wasn't ideal. It just held a wish for a better life that so many people were dreaming of. It was the time when there were some indicators that life might be slightly better for people. Some jobs for construction workers, in addition to temporary jobs, were available. Higher number of trucks loaded with cement construction materials were allowed into Gaza. But the 2007 blockade has put on hold even those buds of hopes and aspirations for Gazans, particularly for the younger generations who had dreams to study abroad, access education, or get opportunities to work in the local market. The closed crossings meant living on the largest open-air prison, a term that has started to appear in 2007, imposing restrictions on movements, especially for patients who try to seek treatment outside of Gaza. One youngster I met, he said that the blockade has shut down all of his dreams. And another one said the blockade has pushed our lives 50 years backwards. And the UN described the devastating implications of the blockade as de-development of the territory. On the personal level, 2007 was a turning point in my life. I was getting married, starting a family, and landing a new job in the humanitarian sector with Anera at that time. I remember that the construction materials, even wood for furniture and mattresses, were not available in the local market. And instead, whatever old and decayed wooden boxes were used or recycled. So the siege has led to shortages of basic items like food and fuel, and made problems such as access to healthcare, clean water, and education more prominent. And those years of blockade has been worsened by the 4 wars, leaving behind so many scenes of destructions, the last of which, the most destructive one, the 11 days of May bombings. So people's lives were hit hard. So many people lost their own businesses. And I think that the blockade has made the suffering visible to the public sphere. So when I joined Anera in 2007, I saw a glimpse of hope and a ray of light coming down the road. It felt more than a job to do or a task to finish, rather a call of humanity. Anera has contributed to improve many sectors in the regions in hopes to alleviate the sufferings and increase people's sumud or steadfastness. What Anera is doing is fascinating and life-saving, as the history of the organization is tied to the histories of suffering of Palestinians since the 1960s. Invested in building skills, improving access to water, healthcare, and education. And because half of our population live below the poverty line during emergencies, Anera continues to prioritize food assistance by delivering hot meals, e-vouchers, and food packages, as well as providing life-saving medicines to local hospitals and clinics, responding to direct needs from paramedics and doctors. Anera also invested in the constructions and rehabilitations of water wells, RO units, to provide safe waters for residents, and provided hundreds of rooftop gardens, greenhouses to help families grow their own food so they become self-reliant. And it trained so many teachers, built schools to set up children for a brighter future, and also supported women leading small businesses and entrepreneurship. So I'm always amazed by the families and the people whom I meet on the ground, either to interview them for a story or get their impact or their feedback about life and how programs and how Anera is trying to help a little bit, help them amid all of this despair and suffering that they have. But I honestly think that let's not overestimate the resilience and coping mechanism of people, and it's time to show support and make the needs visible and support Anera's programs to deliver and continue to support people. And finally, I'd like to show a film that was shot and produced in Gaza to take you firsthand to the scenes, to watch some of the images from the ground and see some of our work directly supporting communities, different parts of Gaza. And Ellie, can you please play the film?